Our next piece is really about, we of course know what values is, just like Curtis was talking about the value that people are going to look for and how does universities and colleges shape for that. And then we also talked about all the different ways that campuses are really going to reinvent themselves based on what they've already done well, or they've now adjusted in the COVID world. But to do that, you also need some skills within these campuses, right? And so we're going to move and turn to a discussion around what are the skills that you will need to differentiate your campus in the future, right? So if we're moving to this new next generation campus, the campus that is going to have to think differently, operate slightly different, what are the skills that are going to differentiate campuses of the future? And that's our first poll, our next poll question that we have. I'm going to launch that. Would love anyone's thought on it, but let me just go through the question and the options that the poll has. And so what are the skills that will differentiate campuses for the future? One option is new leadership skills, change management skills, decision-making skills, digital literacy, managing remote teams, new work discipline, innovative ninja skills, and other. And so there's a few of them here that I'd love to dive a little deeper on with you all, but I'd love to hear the folks that are putting some responses here across the board. Love your thoughts on it.
One of the things I'm thinking is as you're going through the poll, Isabelle texted me something, in the chat that I thought was real interesting. It's not only our skills too, but there are students who are now learning how to learn remotely, and that they seem to have, there are students out there who have taken to it very well. And by going back to sort of what Kelly said, that, some of this is really hybrid. We need to give them a choice. But, it's not only our skills, but what are the students learning and needing as well.
Yeah, what's going off on the what you were saying, John, about the students that are going to enroll, like in the phone, they've been already 1 year online. Mm-hmm. So they are expecting us to have been also 1 year online. So they expect actually higher even skills in terms of remote, higher than their high school teacher.
Right.
And they can adapt extremely fast. I've been teaching online in the phone or part of the last spring, but even in the phone, they were already, okay, but they were still, so-so. But between the phone and the spring, oh my God, they have that under their belt. And some of them are going to expect for some classes that they think it's easier for them to take it online. It fits better. The class can be offered at a time that would fit better their schedule. They're going to request, why can this class be online? And the faculty needs to be ready for that.
Yeah.
Hey, Curtis, I think I hit one. I just remembered what you said, and we're really getting into is customer journey mapping, student journey mapping, and really getting hard with ourselves about that, of not what we wish it was, but what it truly is. And somebody had mentioned this before, because that's so key to taking and removing all those friction points from that process, because anybody's going to compete with the expectations that are out there in the world about this. Is you've got to remove any of those barriers to entry of somebody who wants to approach you and become part of your community and be part of your organization.
So what do we get out of the survey, Matt?
Yeah, so, I forgot to end the poll, sorry. I'll do it right now. So Jim, while you just said that, what I realized is one of the things that we're missing here is the ability to identify frictionless elements of a campus. So when you do a journey map, you're trying to figure out what is a good experience, what's a bad experience, and then you're going to try to redefine your process, right? So that's a skill. I think there's a design thinking skill that needs to be had at these campuses, because you have to empathize with who you're serving. And I think that's a skill that we didn't put up here, but as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, wow. It's an empathy and journey mapping skill, because that's what journey mapping is doing when we're designing things. So, of course, change management, this is the most funniest thing. This change management skill has been around since 1990. Since we've been putting in student systems, we've been talking about change management. But as soon as you are at a university and they have a budget constraint of some sort on a project, you know what gets cut? Change management. And then all of a sudden they wonder, why did this implementation cost so much money? Because you've never actually encouraged the change that you have actually paid for, that you've invested for. And this is where CIOs and presidents and provosts need to recognize is sometimes a change is more a better investment than the actual implementation. Because if you invest in the change, your implementation is going to be much more streamlined in the way that it gets designed. And not even in SIS, in your CRM, in your learning management system, in your communication, your adoption of Slack. Like, I can go through all of the things that campuses are going to need to do. And I will say to you, the first thing you got to think about is, how is this change element going to be fostered on your campus? And until you do that, you're always going to have high cost implementations, because you're still trying to repeat and repave the old ecosystem that you're always been on. So I honestly, I was a little surprised that was our highest thing, because I thought that, people wouldn't think that, but I agree. The thing here is, one of the things we recognize is digital literacy was really low on campus. I don't know if you guys have saw this, but some campuses closed shop for 2 weeks to teach them LMSs that they've been using for a decade. And people didn't know how to use Canvas and Blackboard. And that was pretty amazing that shed light on it. I see Kelly jumped on.
Yeah, I actually found it. Can you hear me okay? I had to change my audio.
Yeah.
Okay. I found that really interesting, because we were looking at potentially changing our LMS, and we found after when we compared the data from fall of 2019 to fall of 2020, and we did a deep dive into the specific functions of the LMS, that the engagement by the faculty was 7 times greater in those areas in key functions. And we realized, oh my goodness, like, we can't rip that out from them. We've been asking them to use it for years, and they finally made that investment. Love it or hate it, they're using it. And it was like, it was just the coolest, side by side, to see such a dramatic increase in the engagement.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, Matt, I just, echo kind of what you were saying, which is we've talked a big game about change management. It's people, process, and technology, and people are the first order of business that gets put, taken off the table, right? So it just becomes about process and technology, and we wonder why we don't really advance things. So cultural and people change transformation has to be the agenda. And I think it's interesting, even hearing Kelly speak about it, someone who's living and breathing on a daily basis. And I said this on the last call last week, I think, the pandemic has forced people who are really uncomfortable with, particularly the technology environments they were asked to work within in their institutions. And now suddenly they're forced to do it, and they realize, oh, it's maybe not so bad. And maybe there's actually incremental value I can get out of it. If we can tap into that vein, I think you'll see the utility increase for the systems that you have in place, the willingness and stronger embrace of activities that will drive that culture transformations can be super necessary to advance things that get you to that innovation agenda that you had on the list as well. None of that happens if you don't take advantage of the moment and kind of drive these change programs at the people level in a more deliberate fashion.
Rob Sparks just had to leave, but he had a very good point there that his other was having the entrepreneurial spirit, being really able to step away, from the this is the way we've always done it mindset that seems to permeate a lot of higher education, and trying to figure out, hey, we're in a new world now. What's the new way of doing things?
So
if I can add something, just going back to the change management. So, all the topics that we're talking about, to me, it all feeds right into what Matt said, which was really the change management is so key. And they're all parts of that. It's being able to embrace what's the change, what's this new, tech that I'm using? How do I, deliver new services to my clients? They're all change management based. And my experience over all the years has always been the clients that I've worked with that have been most successful have always really stuck to their change management plan. It has been top down, and they've always gone back to what was our scope for change? What did we want to do? What do we want to accomplish? And then they start to trim the fat of the pieces that they realized were not as essential to meeting what that change goal was. So I'm glad. I'm not surprised that change management was high on that list. The difference is that implementing it and putting it in practice is always the hard part. It does get cut first thing for a lot of people. So
yeah, and I love the fact that we're having this change discussion. So for me, change is more than just, let me tell you what your job is going to do differently and we're going to put training around it. Change is about laying a vision out and laying a understanding of how that change is going to impact your institution, impact the people that use it, and people who are impacted by the process that you're doing. There is that exercise that I think schools don't do, right? Just think about the life cycle of how we put these implementations in. You have a sales guy coming in to talk to you about a change that they have a software done. You have not had a discussion about where are you trying to go? What type of impacts are you changing? What is going to do on a day-to-day change? You have to get people to buy in to the change that you are going to go spend $1 million on. And it has to come from top down. It has to come from a why statement. It has to come from a culture. What is the culture you are fostering? I'll give everyone a secret. Implementations could be much cheaper if you do better planning, better implementation strategies, and change, right? If you do those three things, the actual implementation is a configuration exercise, which is much cheaper in the long run if you think through it. Why is Beyond not in the implementation world? Because I think it's an inefficient process and dollar amount that people put in. But if we collectively, all the skilled people in this office, in this room, could have the discussion about, let's plan properly. Let's do it before the configuration elements start or this development cycle wish list starts. When you start having a wish list in an implementation, you are now starting to creep on every scope you're trying to contain. It's just an important element. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and just quickly, what's interesting to me is everybody's talking, the number one thing here is change management skills. There is innovative ninja skills. One of the lowest things here was decision making. I mean, it's just an old saw in higher ed that have voted 19-1 as a tie. And somehow or another, I think we need to update update our decision-making skills to be able to make the change management work. I've seen so much of the change management initiatives die just because you can't, or the institution can't reach a basic decision. It has to go through committee after committee after committee to get there. And to me, that updating how you govern and how you approach things and decide things is going to be key if any of this other stuff is to work.
Yeah, I know yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add, it's with any business, right? Part of the big part is your vision. What's your vision? And if you kind of decide on your change management and your decision makers aren't engaged, you always have to come back what the vision is. What is it that you're trying to accomplish as an institution, as a university, as a business? And you have your vision, your mission, all the big words we have, but that really drives. And if you keep coming back to it and reminding them of that, You know, it's not just about teaching, you know, students. It's not just about delivering programs. What's your vision as an institution? Everything we've talked about, what's your market, what's your brand going to be? Get that vision, get on track, stick on your change management. And I think but it is really hard. It's a big boat to move for a lot of institutions.
Yeah.
I think
And the example that I'll give you, Laurie, is if your vision is you want to become a frictionless campus where everything is easy for your students to get through, you know, the process. That's a cultural statement. That means everything you do, from financial aid to admissions to HR to wherever your students and faculty are interacting, what are those things that are going to allow you to have a frictionless campus? That's the discussion you'll have when the financial aid director or the admissions director say, hey, we don't do it that way. The question is, okay, is this helping us in our mission of frictionless campus or not? That was just one example of that. I know we're a little bit past time. I think I appreciate if people have to drop, we understand it. I'm gonna hold the room a little bit longer because I think there is one topic that I wanted to just talk. And we don't really talk about it in like a skill, but there's a trust skill that leaders need to have. And it goes into that managing a remote team concept. Trust is probably one of the biggest parts of how a campus will change, how an organization changes, is that leaders have to trust who they're giving accountability to and allow for them to drive the mission that you are really achieving. Because I've seen this where we had CIOs that won't let their teams work remotely and they lost people. And the question is why? Because they didn't trust them. And I keep saying the culture is you have to build a trust that you give ownership and accountability to your team that allows you to be a really powerful remote ecosystem. That means no one needs to be micromanaged. You're managing to the accountability that you've empowered your team to have, and then you drive that. And I think it's a piece that I think is very important as we move forward in this ecosystem. There is a trust element in how universities operate within that campus.
well, going over that, I think it's funny because I was asking our academic coordinator how, you know, she had made arrangement to work remotely and all this. And then she said like, well, I have to come to campus 2 days a week. And I'm like, why? Because if they trust you to do the work the other 3 days of the week, why you wouldn't do the work the 2 days of the other 2 days of the week that they are forcing you to come to campus? Said, oh, well, that's the rule. And I'm like, I mean, 3 days, it's even more than 2 days. So if they think that you're going to be a slacker for 3 days, it's even worse than being a slacker for 2 days. So, but that was the type of reasoning. And for many of the staff, they could not, at least at my institution, they could not do full remote work. They had to come to campus 2 days or 3 days a week, depending on the unit, and for nothing, because they were not necessarily in contact with students. Students were not here, faculty were not here. They didn't have to do anything at all, just moving. And that was, for me, a waste of time and a waste of money and a waste of energy, because they had to transfer all their operation from their home, where they could have set up all their little home office, to now, oh no, for 2 days, I need to, you know, get all my stuff to campus. But and I'm sure we're not the only institution like that.
Yeah, so you make a point, and I think, you know, and I've been focused on student systems for years, but there is a talent and workforce element that campuses have to recognize. They have to do a better job in creating a culture that allows for you to let people want to come on campus. So the way that I believe this will happen is that there's things that you should be able to do at home that doesn't require you to come on campus, and you should be able to do those things at home. There is some cultural value in co-locating in a space. There is some value there, there is a little bit of trust, there's a little bit of brainstorming, there's a little bit of, I believe that you have to start to identify what are the activities that require us to be together, and what are the requires that allow us to have our own space to do that work. And when we start to organize workplaces like that within a campus, you will see that space will open up, you will be more efficient in the way you run. Right now, investments are going into technologies to do, how do you hire someone? How do you give them a payroll? How do you, like, all these things? And the reality of it is they need to stop and think, what does their culture look like in that campus? Because that culture is what fosters what your students feel. When someone is happy to be on campus and they're working with a student, that culture comes from that element of it. So there's a skill of a new workforce management is going to be an important piece. So we're at the bottom of our time. I wanted to say thanks for everyone who stayed and joined us this week. I welcome you guys to stay. We're going to turn the cameras off and you guys can stay, as we call it, post mingle. I welcome you guys to join on Clubhouse as we continue to foster new discussions. We will do our Zoom-ins. We've been doing this pretty consistently. So I welcome you guys continuing to show up and join us. I welcome topics that you think we should tackle. Also, share it out. You know, if the more we get people in these discussions, the more we have people pushing the boulder up the hill, because we needed to get over the hill for it to really start to do really amazing things on campus.